Daniel awoke to the rhythmic sound of rain tapping against his bedroom window. The dim glow of the morning light filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. His beagle, Max, sat at the foot of the bed, ears perked, eyes locked on him with an intensity that made Daniel pause. Max was always an affectionate dog, but this was different. His gaze wasn't one of excitement or playfulness. It was something else, something urgent. Daniel ran a hand through his tousled hair and swung his legs over the edge of the bed, stretching. That's when Max moved, placing a firm paw against his chest. The pressure was deliberate, his nails just barely grazing the fabric of Daniel's t-shirt. "All right, buddy," Daniel chuckled, rubbing behind Max's ears. "I know. You want breakfast." But Max didn't budge. Instead, he let out a soft whine, his nose twitching as he pressed his paw more insistently against Daniel's chest. The dog's brown eyes flickered with something close to desperation. Daniel frowned. "What's with you this morning?" He brushed Max's paw away and stood, but the dog followed him into the kitchen, sticking unervingly close to his side. As Daniel poured himself a cup of coffee, Max circled his legs, nudging his knee, his tail stiff. Every few seconds, he would rear up on his hind legs and press a paw against Daniel's torso again. Okay. I get it," Daniel said, setting his coffee down. "You need a walk, huh?" The word usually sent Max into a frenzy of excitement, but today, he remained still, ears slightly flattened. Daniel sighed, grabbing the leash. Maybe Max had a bad dream. Maybe he was just restless. Either way, a brisk walk in the cool morning air would do them both some good. As they made their way down the quiet suburban streets, Daniel's mind drifted. Work had been stressful. His boss had been piling on deadlines, and the tension in his shoulders hadn't eased in weeks. Maybe he needed this walk as much as Max did. Halfway through their route, Max suddenly stopped. His body went rigid, and before Daniel could react, he lunged, pressing his front paws against Daniel's chest with force. Daniel stumbled back, catching himself against a lamppost. "What the hell, Max?" Max whimpered, lowering his head, but his tail remained stiff, his entire body radiating tension. Daniel placed a hand over his heart, feeling it thud steadily beneath his ribs. He wasn't out of breath, he wasn't dizzy, but something about Max's behavior sent an uneasy prickle down his spine. Shaking off the discomfort, Daniel tugged lightly on the leash. "Come on, let's go home." The rest of the day passed without incident, but Max's behavior didn't change. He followed Daniel from room to room, never letting him out of sight. And every few minutes, he would reach out with his paw, tapping Daniel's chest as if trying to tell him something. By the time night fell, Daniel was exhausted. He collapsed onto the couch, flipping through channels mindlessly. Max sat at his feet, staring up at him with unrelenting focus. "You're acting weird, you know that?" Daniel muttered. Max didn't move. With a sigh, Daniel stretched and stood, making his way to bed. As soon as he lay down, Max jumped up beside him, something he never did uninvited. "Hey, no," Daniel scolded lightly, nudging him aside. But Max crawled forward, placing his paw firmly on Daniel's chest again. Daniel exhaled sharply. "Max, come on." The dog let out a low whine. A dull ache bloomed in Daniel's chest, fleeting but noticeable. He frowned, rubbing the spot absent-mindedly. Probably just indigestion. He had eaten pretty late. Shaking his head, he patted Max and turned over. "Go to sleep, buddy." But Max didn't sleep. Daniel woke in the middle of the night to find the dog sitting beside him, wide-eyed, ears perked, and trembling slightly. The unease that had been lingering all day tightened its grip around Daniel's thoughts. He swallowed, willing himself to ignore it, but the feeling refused to fade. Something about the way Max was acting, it wasn't normal. And it wasn't stopping. Daniel sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel harder than necessary. The hospital's fluorescent glow loomed ahead, its glass doors sliding open and shut as a handful of people trickled in and out. His heartbeat drummed steadily in his chest, a rhythm he had never paid attention to before. Max sat in the passenger seat, his ears perked, his body rigid with anticipation. He had whined the entire drive, pressing his nose against Daniel's arm, tapping at his chest every few minutes as if afraid Daniel might vanish before they arrived. "This is ridiculous," Daniel muttered under his breath, running a hand over his face. "I feel fine." But did he? That sharp twinge from the night before had returned twice today, fleeting but undeniable. It wasn't pain, not really, just an odd, squeezing sensation that faded as quickly as it came. Enough to make him pause. Enough to keep Max on edge. With a resigned sigh, Daniel stepped out of the car, reaching for Max's leash. The dog scrambled over the console, practically dragging him toward the entrance. Inside, the ER was as he expected, bright, sterile, and humming with quiet urgency. Nurses moved between patients, doctors scanned clipboards, machines beeped softly in the background. The receptionist barely glanced up as she took his information. "What brings you in tonight?" Daniel hesitated. I've had some chest discomfort. Nothing serious, but my dog's been acting weird about it." Her eyes flickered with something, amusement? Annoyance? Before she nodded and typed something into the computer. "We'll get you checked out." Max whined as Daniel was led away, his leash handed off to a nurse. The dog pulled, resisting, his nails scraping against the tile, as if he knew something Daniel didn't. For the first time all day, a cold trickle of unease slid down Daniel's spine. He was led to an exam room, where a nurse checked his vitals, blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen levels. Everything seemed normal. She hummed thoughtfully, noting something in her chart before stepping out. Minutes passed. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence. Then the doctor entered, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a crisp white coat. He glanced at Daniel's chart, then at him. "Chest discomfort, huh?" Daniel nodded, feeling suddenly foolish. "Yeah, but it's not constant. Just weird pressure now and then. Honestly, I wouldn't have come in if it weren't for my dog losing his mind over it." The doctor smiled at that. "Dogs have good instincts. You'd be surprised how many people come in because their pets wouldn't let them ignore something." Daniel exhaled, relaxing slightly. Maybe this would be nothing. Maybe he'd go home and laugh about it later. "Let's run some tests," the doctor said. "Just to be safe." An hour later, Daniel wasn't laughing. He sat on the exam table, staring at the doctor as the words sank in. "You have a significant arterial blockage," the doctor repeated, his tone calm but firm. "If you hadn't come in, you could have suffered a major heart attack within days." Daniel's mouth went dry. "That's not possible," he said hoarsely. I exercise, I eat okay. No history of heart disease." The doctor nodded. "Sometimes, symptoms don't appear until it's almost too late. You're lucky. We caught this in time." Lucky. Daniel felt his pulse hammer against his ribs, this time from something far worse than discomfort. He had almost ignored this. He had almost written Max's warnings off as paranoia. Max had known. Somehow, he had known. "We'll need to act quickly," the doctor continued. "You'll need a procedure to clear the blockage, possibly a stent. But the good news is, because we caught it early, your chances of a full recovery are high." Daniel barely heard him. His mind was spinning, images flashing, Max's paw on his chest, the way he had refused to leave Daniel alone, the way he had fought to get him here. A nurse entered then, smiling as she handed him a clipboard. "Your dog's been restless in the waiting room," she said. "He won't sit still. He keeps looking toward the doors, like he's waiting for you." Daniel swallowed past the lump in his throat. "Can I see him?" The nurse hesitated. "Just for a moment. Then we need to prepare you for treatment." Daniel was led back to the waiting room, where Max sat by the door, ears pinned, eyes darting toward every movement. The moment he spotted Daniel, he lunged, straining against his leash, barking wildly. Hey, Daniel murmured, kneeling. "It's okay, buddy. You did good. You saved me." Max whined, pressing his face against Daniel's chest, tail wagging weakly. Daniel exhaled, running his fingers through Max's fur. Lucky, the doctor had said. No. Max had made him lucky. Daniel lay on the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the air, and the quiet beeping of a heart monitor provided an unsettling rhythm to his thoughts. The words from the doctor still echoed in his mind. A major heart attack within days. It didn't seem real. He felt fine. No searing pain, no breathlessness. Just that odd, persistent discomfort Max had sensed before he even knew something was wrong. Max. Daniel shifted, glancing toward the door. His heart ached, not from illness, but from the thought of his dog waiting, confused and alone. The nurses had promised to check on him, but it wasn't enough. He needed Max here. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. The doctor stepped inside, followed by a nurse holding a clipboard. "We're scheduling you for an emergency angioplasty," the doctor said. "We'll insert a stent to open the blocked artery." Daniel nodded, his mind still half elsewhere. "And after? What's recovery look like?" The doctor smiled reassuringly. "If everything goes well, you'll need a few days of rest, some medication adjustments and lifestyle changes. But thanks to your early arrival, we're looking at a strong recovery." Daniel let out a slow breath. Early arrival. That was all Max. If he hadn't been so relentless, if Daniel had ignored him like he first wanted to, he wouldn't have survived the week. A weight settled in his chest, not from the blockage but from the sheer gravity of it all. The nurse adjusted his fore. "Do you have someone to call? Family? A friend?" Daniel hesitated. His parents lived states away, and he wasn't particularly close to them. His friends were mostly work acquaintances. The only one who had truly been there, who had refused to leave his side, was sitting in a waiting room, probably wondering why he wasn't coming back. "No," Daniel said finally. "Just my dog." The nurse smiled. "He must be special." Daniel swallowed past the lump in his throat. "He's more than special. He saved my life." The procedure was a blur. The bright lights of the operating room, the cold of the surgical table, the dull haze of anesthesia pulling him under. When he woke, groggy and sore, the first thing he saw was a nurse adjusting his fore. "Everything went smoothly," she said. "The blockage is cleared. You're going to be just fine." Daniel blinked, his mouth dry. "Max." She hesitated. "Your dog." He nodded. "Where is he?" The nurse's expression softened. "He's been waiting all night. He wouldn't let anyone near him. He only calmed down when we told him you were okay." Daniel exhaled, relief flooding his system stronger than the medication coursing through his veins. "Can I see him?" The nurse smiled. "I'll see what I can do." It was late when they let Max in. A kind receptionist had bent the rules, escorting the beagle into Daniel's dimly lit hospital room. The moment Max saw him, he bolted forward, jumping onto the bed before anyone could stop him. Daniel let out a weak chuckle as Max buried his face in his chest, tail wagging so hard the entire bed shook. "Hey, buddy," he murmured, scratching behind his ears. "I'm okay. Thanks to you." Max let out a low whimper, pressing closer as if afraid Daniel might disappear. Daniel felt something tighten in his throat. He had always known dogs were loyal, but this was something more. Max had sensed the danger before any machine, before any symptom. He had fought for Daniel's life when Daniel himself had dismissed it. "Looks like he's not going anywhere," the nurse said with a smile. Daniel nodded, running his fingers through Max's fur. "Yeah," he said softly. "Neither am I." The morning light filtered through the hospital blinds, casting soft, golden streaks across the white sheets of Daniel's bed. He was awake but still, his hand resting gently on Max's back as the dog lay curled beside him, breathing evenly. The steady rise and fall of Max's chest was oddly soothing, a stark contrast to the chaos that had led them here. A few days ago, Daniel had been living his normal routine, working long hours, skipping the gym more often than not, ignoring the warning signs his own body was trying to give him. But Max had known. Somehow, in the way that only dogs could, he had sensed the danger lurking beneath the surface. Daniel's free hand drifted to his own chest, fingers brushing against the thin hospital gown. The soreness was there, a dull reminder of the blockage that had nearly taken him. The procedure had been a success, the doctors assured him. He had been lucky. No. Max had made him lucky. A soft knock at the door made Max lift his head, ears perking. A moment later, the doctor stepped in, his expression warm. "Good to see you awake," he said, glancing at the chart in his hands. "How are you feeling?" Daniel shifted slightly, mindful of the 4 in his arm. "Better. Sore, but better." The doctor nodded. "That's expected. Your heart went through a lot, but you're recovering well." He paused, flipping through a few pages. "Your case is an interesting one. If you hadn't come in when you did," he trailed off, shaking his head. Daniel didn't need him to finish. He already knew. "I almost didn't," he admitted. "I felt fine. No real pain. I would have ignored it if it weren't for him." He gestured toward Max, who was now sitting upright, watching the doctor with wary eyes. The doctor smiled. "Dogs have been known to detect illnesses in their owners. Some can even sense cancer, seizures, or drops in blood sugar. There have been cases of dogs alerting people to heart problems before they even show up in tests." He gave Max an appraising look. "Your beagle here might just have saved your life." Daniel exhaled, shaking his head in disbelief. "I owe him everything." The doctor chuckled. "Then I'd say he's earned a few extra treats." He tucked the clipboard under his arm. "You'll be discharged tomorrow, but you'll need to take it easy for a while. Light activity, medication, dietary changes. No more skipping checkups." Daniel smirked. "I don't think Max will let me." The doctor laughed. "I believe that." With a final nod, he left the room, the door clicking softly behind him. Silence settled once more, interrupted only by the distant hum of hospital machinery. Daniel glanced down at Max, who was now watching him intently, his head tilted ever so slightly. "You knew, didn't you?" Daniel murmured. "You felt it before I did." Max's tail thumped against the sheets. Daniel reached out, scratching behind his ears. "You didn't just save my life," he whispered. "You changed it." And he meant it. He had spent years living on autopilot, working, eating whatever was convenient, brushing off exhaustion as part of life. He had ignored the little signs, taken his health for granted. But Max hadn't. Max had fought for him when he wouldn't fight for himself. Daniel smiled faintly. "Guess I better start listening to you more, huh?" Max licked his hand in response, his eyes bright and unwavering. Daniel let out a soft chuckle, leaning back against the pillows. Tomorrow they'd go home. Tomorrow he'd start fresh. And this time, he wouldn't ignore the signs. This time, he'd live.